I made it special for your nerves, Ma. Evan said, setting the cup down in front of me like it was peace after battle. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Those were James' eyes, his daddy's. But they'd gone hard and flat years ago. I didn't sip. Not right away. Just yesterday, I'd found that envelope, wedged between the electric bill and a feed catalogue. A life insurance policy, brand new. My name at the top, Evans. Name at the bottom. Beneficiary sole. He'd barely hugged me when he walked in this morning. Just brushed the screen door aside like it was his house. You shouldn't be out here alone, he'd said. Glancing around my tidy porch with all its potted ferns. Like he was scouting the place, like he wasn't born in it. So now here he was, with herbal tea and soft concern. Calling me Ma more times than I'd heard since Clinton was president. And I, fool that I've been, nodded and said, thank you. But I didn't drink. I reached for it with my left hand, arthritis twisting my knuckles like stubborn roots. But my right hand slipped beneath the table, opening the old velvet pouch I used for heirloom seeds. I tilted the cup just enough to pour some of it inside. The pouch was lined. Laura gave it to me for collecting precious things. She'll get a kick out of this one. You look good, Ma, Evan said. For 78, I mean. His voice was too sweet. Like a pie someone oversugared to hide it had spoiled fruit. The chair creaked beneath me as I leaned back and gave him a long look. Well, I'm not dead yet. He laughed, that hollow bark of a laugh. Then reached for my hand across the table. I just want to reconnect, be here for you. Funny. He hadn't been here for me when I fell off the porch steps last spring and needed a ride to the clinic. Or when the hip surgery happened. Or when the roof leaked during the hurricane. And I had to patch it myself, cussing all the way. But now here he was, with tea and a smile like a man who thinks his 3 moves ahead. The grandfather clock struck 3 in the parlor. That old thing always ran 5 minutes fast. Evan flinched a little at the sound. Just a hair, but I caught it. His nervous. Good. Well, I said, folding my napkin and dabbing the corner of my lips like a good southern lady. Why don't you stay for dinner? I've got some beans on the stove and cornbread in the oven. His eyes lit up like I'd handed him the deed. Sure, Ma, that sounds real nice. I got up slowly, knees creaking louder than the floorboards, and made my way to the kitchen. As I stirred the pot, I looked out the window, toward the shed. James built that thing with his bare hands. The walls still hold his smell, cedar, and pipe tobacco. If Evan thinks I'm soft just because I knit and talk to my plants, he's forgotten who raised him. The tea sat untouched on the table behind me, cooling next to a vase of fresh-cut roses, the same ones I used to prune, while Evan played in the yard back, before he got too busy to come home. In my apron pocket, the little seed pouch was safe. I'd take it to Laura first thing in the morning. But tonight, I'd let him think he'd won. And sweetheart, he really shouldn't have called me obsolete. Not in this house. Not in my garden. Because this old woman's roots run deep. Locked the vault behind him. This morning I stood barefoot in my garden. Fingers in the soil. The dew was cold against my arches. But I liked it. Reminded me I'm still alive, still here, still watching. The vial of tea, well, what I saved of it, sat on my kitchen counter, sealed tight in a jelly jar. I'd cleaned and labeled it like I do all my preserves. April 12th, suspicious. That's what I wrote. Just that. Laura would know what to do next. But out there in the early fog, I let myself remember. After James passed, Evan disappeared like a stone, tossed in a river. 1 minute, we were standing side by side at the graveside. He was holding my elbow so tight, I thought he'd leave bruises. The next, he was just gone. No visits. Not even a phone call after my hip surgery. Laura had to drive me both ways. Bless her. I tried not to take it personally. You know how men get, I told myself. Grief makes them quiet, angry. But years went by and the silence never changed. Until last week when he called out of the blue. Just wanted to check in on you, Ma, he said. Thinking maybe I should come visit. I should have known then. Folks don't change that sudden unless they want something. And Evan, he never wanted anything that didn't benefit him. When he was a boy, he used to sneak sugar cubes from the tea tin. Thinking I didn't notice. I let it go because I figured. What's a little sweetness in a world that can be so bitter? But now I wonder, maybe he's always had that. Hunger for what wasn't his. He was charming when he wanted to be. Could melt butter with his voice. That's what Laura used to say. But even as a teenager, he had that flicker. Behind his eyes, like he was always calculating. Always waiting to see what he could get out of you before you caught on. Still, I told myself it was good he came back. I told myself maybe this was a second chance. But darling, second chances come with sincerity. Not with tea laced with something strange. And an insurance policy I never signed. I spent most of the morning clipping roses. And watching the road. No sign of him today. Probably back in town making phone calls. Lining things up. He didn't know I'd gone into his jacket pocket. While he was out back last night pretending to admire the garden. Found his phone unlocked. God bless his arrogance. Noticed recent calls to a number labeled just DC. And when I googled that number, it was tied to a man. Known for financial consultation and asset repositioning for seniors. Scam artist. Plain and simple. I looked around my home. The hand-stitched curtains. The quilt over the rocking chair. James' pipe still resting on the mantel. I've built a life here. It's modest, yes, but it's mine. Every beam soaked with effort and memory. And now my only child wants to cash me in. Like I'm some rainy day fund. I pressed my arthritic thumb against the old tea label. From James' apothecary kit. He used to say, every plant has a purpose. But some are poison dressed up pretty. I reckon people are the same. Tomorrow, I'll take that jelly jar to Laura. She always did have a steady hand. And a nurse's suspicion. She'll know if there's truth inside that tea. And as for Evan, let him keep smiling. Let him keep calling me Ma like he means it. Because, sweetheart, I'm planting something, too. And I promise you, when it blooms, it won't be what he expects. Laura didn't ask questions when I showed up. At her door holding that jelly jar like it was holy water. Come in, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. The smell of cloves and wood polish hit me. As I stepped inside, her little kitchen still looked just like it did back in '89. Lace curtains, spice rack alphabetized. Old clock ticking like a heartbeat. I handed her the jar, my hands shaking just slightly. He brought me tea, I said. Didn't drink it. She held it up to the light. Looks harmless. So does he, I muttered. Laura didn't smile. She just opened the jar. Dipped a cotton swab inside. And got to work like she'd been waiting for this moment. Years of nursing hadn't dulled her instincts. And she never did trust Evan. She placed a small sample into her old portable testing kit. The thing looked like a tackle box. But was smarter than half the doctors I'd ever met. We sat at the kitchen table in silence. The wind rustled the wind chimes outside. That soft metallic tingle that made my neck prickle. Why now? She finally asked. What brought him back? I stared at her ceramic teapot, pale blue. Same one she used when James passed. Found a new life insurance policy in my name. Evan's the sole beneficiary. Laura didn't blink. You sign anything? Not knowingly. She nodded and turned back to her testing kit. Sedatives, she said finally. Low dose. But enough to keep you drowsy. Passive. Confused if he keeps it up long enough. My chest got tight. I thought I was ready to hear it. But confirmation has a weight all its own. Could be prescription, she added. Or imported. He's careful. But this ain't chamomile, Doris. I looked down at my palms. Dirt still in the creases from this morning's gardening. James used to call them honest hands. Laura reached over and covered mine with hers. You know what this is, don't you? I nodded. It's a setup. He wants to wear me down. Make me look like I can't take care of myself. Probably thinking I'll sign a power of attorney or worse. The wind chimes clattered harder now. Storm coming. I could feel it in my knees. I'll help you, Laura said simply. We're not letting him get away with this. That's the thing about old women, sweetheart. We may be soft-spoken. We may bake pies and wear shawls. And cry at Christmas pageants. But when the ones we love are used against us, we harden like kill-fired clay. Laura took the tea back to her freezer. Tucked it behind an old pork roast. We'll get this to someone official, she said. But first, you keep playing along. Keep smiling. Don't give him a reason to bolt. I nodded. He thinks I'm fragile. Thinks he's smarter. He thinks wrong. As I left, she handed me a slice of lemon pound cake, wrapped in wax paper. Keep up your strength, she said. I drove home with the cake on the passenger seat, and a fury in my chest I hadn't felt since James's funeral, when Evan vanished like a ghost with a trust fund. The clouds had gathered low over the mountains. The air was heavy. My porch light blinked on as I pulled into the gravel drive, casting a long shadow across the steps. Inside, everything looked the same. Teacups in the sink. James's favorite chair empty. But I felt different. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I brewed my own cup of tea, chamomile, real this time. And I sat by the window as the rain began to fall. I'd let him believe the potion was working. That I was softening, slipping. But tomorrow, I'd call him. I'd thank him for his calming tea. And I'd invite him to spend more time with me. Because Evan thinks he's hunting an old woman in the woods. But he doesn't know. Darling, this forest still belongs to me. Yesterday, I played the part. I picked up the phone and called Evan around mid-morning. Same time I used to ring him when he still bothered to answer. Hi, sweetheart, I said, soft as butter on a biscuit. Just wanted to say thank you. That tea helped me sleep like a baby. There was a pause. Not long, but just enough. Then that syrupy voice slid through the line. See, told you it'd help your nerves. I was thinking, I said, twisting the cord around my finger. Like I used to do when James called from the clinic. Maybe you're right. I've been too proud. Maybe I do need help around here. That got him. I could hear the smile in his voice. I'd love to stay for a while, Ma. You shouldn't be alone out there. I almost laughed. I've lived alone just fine for 30 years. Raised goats, buried a husband. And put up pickles that won blue ribbons in 5 counties. But I let the moment hang. Maybe this weekend, I said, my voice wavering just enough. We could spend some time together. You could help me with some of the, important papers. Oh, absolutely. I'll bring everything we need, he said too fast. I didn't ask what everything was. Instead, I walked outside and sat on the porch swing, watching the birds pick through the feeder. I sipped my own tea, mint and honey, and listened to the wind move through the pine trees, like it was telling secrets. That's when I saw him, Evan, across the road in a rental car. Windows down, pretending to scroll his phone. He wasn't coming this weekend. He never left. He's been here watching, waiting. Circling me like a buzzard over roadkill. My stomach didn't drop. My hand didn't tremble. I just rocked gently, letting him think I hadn't noticed. Inside, I opened the old ledger, where James used to keep his planting notes. I added a new entry under April. His not just after the money. He wants the story to look clean. A son helping his fragile mother. No resistance, no questions, no trail. But he underestimated one thing. I've always paid attention. All those years, I kept quiet while Evan made excuses. Missed birthdays, unanswered Christmas cards. The time he asked me to wire him money for car trouble, And it turned out to be a trip to Vegas. I took notes, and now I'm taking them again. After supper, I pulled out James's old recorder. From the box in the attic. Still works. Still sharp. I replaced the batteries and slipped it in my cardigan pocket. Just a test run for now. Just practice. Because this time I won't be the one confused and cornered. He thinks I'm an old fool with a teacup and a pension. But what I really am is a botanist, a widow. And a mother who's done being lied to. He's moving in for the kill. So, I'm letting him get close. Letting him see the door unlocked, the lights on. Letting him think the forest is quiet. But you listen to me, sweetheart. That stillness, it's not surrender, it's strategy. I spent the better part of the afternoon up in the attic. My hands black with dust and memory. James never trusted computers. He kept everything handwritten. Ledgers, receipts, phone numbers scribbled in the margins of seed catalogs. Said paper was harder to hack. Now, bless him, that habit might just save me. I found Evan's old files tucked behind a box of holiday lights. High school transcripts, a thank you note from his first boss. And there it was, a manila folder marked E. James Whitlow, business. I sat cross-legged on the floor, knees aching something awful. Flipping through page after page of financial ghosts. Bank statements with overdrafts circled in red ink. Credit card bills with minimum payments barely scratched. He'd opened 3 cards I didn't recognize, all maxed out. Interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. That's when I spotted it. A phone bill with call logs. Recent ones tied to the landline in my den. The one no one uses anymore except telemarketers. And the occasional call from the garden club. Calls made to a number with a 305 area code. I jotted it down on the back of an old seed envelope. And made my way back down the narrow stairs. Every step groaning like it was telling me to turn around. But I didn't. I went straight to the phone and called Laura. I've got a number, I told her. Evan's been calling it from my house. Probably didn't think I'd know how to pull the logs. She didn't ask how I knew, just said, come by in the morning. I'll see what I can find. I hung up and leaned on the counter. Watching the kettle start to steam. My hand went to James' mug, still chipped at the rim, still perfect. I remember a time when Evan used to help me wash the dishes. After dinner. Said the suds felt funny on his fingers. He'd make soap beards and call himself Bubblebeard the Brave. I used to laugh so hard I'd cry. Now here I was, years later, scrubbing away fingerprints. And wondering if my own child was trying to erase me. I pulled the tea bag from the cup. And looked down at my reflection in the murky water. My face looked tired. Not weak, mind you, just weathered like bark. That's seen 100 winters. On a whim, I dug around in Evan's old bedroom. The one I turned into a sewing room. Sure enough, he left his laptop open. Last time he stepped out for fresh air. Password was still Whitlow 1997. Birth year of his first bankruptcy, if memory serves. He'd been emailing someone named DKFAX. That same name kept showing up in the call logs. I read the last few messages with my mouth pressed into a line. She's alone. No support system. I'm easing her into it. Sedative worked. Soon she'll sign. Need to move fast. Once she's out of it, I can initiate the POA. And push the will update. Her land's worth more than we thought. Realtor Buddy says at least $600,000. Maybe more with timber rights. Get papers ready. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I hit print. The printer in the hallway coughed to life. Wheezing like an old hound dog, but it did the job. Every page spat out hot and damning. I clipped them together with a paperclip shaped like a flower. One of Laura's silly gifts from years ago. She'll appreciate the poetry of it. As I slid the stack into a folder labeled Tax Returns, 2008. I felt something shift in me. Not rage, not grief, clarity. I used to think my son was lost. That maybe, just maybe, he'd find his way back to me. But now I see he didn't get lost, darling. He walked away with purpose. And now he's come back. Not for forgiveness, but for what's mine. Well, let's see how he handles a mother who knows how to document. Laura opened the door before I even knocked. She took one look at my face and didn't bother with pleasantries. "You bring the goods?" she asked, motioning me inside. I handed her the folder marked Tax Returns, 2008. And she raised an eyebrow. Creative. She laid the pages out across her dining room table like puzzle pieces. Her reading glasses slid halfway down her nose. As she read Evan's emails, her lips got tighter with every line. "I'd arrest him myself," she muttered. "If I still had the badge." I smiled just barely. We didn't sit right away. Neither of us wanted to. Too much energy in the room. Like standing near a storm that hasn't broken yet. She finally turned to me. "I know someone. Miles Tully, retired detective. But still consults for the county. Quiet, smart, grew up near Burnsville."
Ouche-me a favor.
I didn't ask what the favor was. Laura's helped half this town out of one mess or another. She made the call right then and there. "It's happening again," she said softly into the phone. "But this time, it's someone I love." She paused, listening. Yes, she has documentation. Emails, call logs, audio recorder. And a jar of suspicious tea. A beat, then a small smile. "I knew that'd get your attention." She hung up and looked at me. "He's coming tomorrow. Just wants to talk, quiet like. You don't have to do anything except tell the truth." That part, at least, I could still do. I stayed for tea, real tea this time. And we sat in her sunroom with the scent of jasmine, drifting in through the screens. But my mind kept drifting back to Evan's email. She's alone. No support system. No support system. Sweetheart, that boy forgot who raised him. I may live alone, but I've never been lonely. There's a difference. Laura's not the only one in this town who knows my number. I've got church ladies who'd show up with casseroles. And pitchforks if I asked. I've got folks at the feed store who've known me since I bought my first hen. Evan's counting on my silence. But I'm not a wallflower. I'm a widow, and I remember how to fight. Later that night, back home, I pulled the recorder from my cardigan pocket. I hadn't even meant to catch anything useful. But habit, it's a funny thing. I turned it on earlier when Evan had called to check in. Said he was looking forward to this weekend. And that he'd, quote, bring the documents from KFAX. I played it back 3 times, each word crisp and plain. Then I tucked the recorder into the back of James' shaving kit, next to the old straight razor he hadn't used in years. It felt right, like putting one kind of blade next to another. Before bed, I wrote one more note in my journal. He thinks I've grown soft. He doesn't see the flint beneath the moss. That's all right. I want him looking the other way when I light the match. And as I turned off the light, I whispered aloud. To no one and everyone. Let him come. The trick to a good trap, darling, is to make it look like a gift. And Lord knows I've spent a lifetime wrapping up sacrifices and handing them out like they were kindness. So when Evan rolled up in that rental car Friday afternoon, with his crocodile smile and a suitcase he barely bothered to zip, I met him on the porch with peach cobbler and open arms. "Oh, Ma, you didn't have to cook," he said. Already eyeing the house like a banker at an estate sale. "Well, you're my guest," I said, brushing a speck of flour off my apron. "And I was thinking, while you're here, we might take a look at the will." He froze, just a blink. But I saw it, that flicker of glee, barely contained. "You've been thinking about your estate?" he asked. Voice sugar slick. "I have," I said, keeping my tone quiet, calm. "I've been alone so long, it got me thinking. You're my only child. Makes sense to get my affairs in order." I could almost hear his thoughts spinning, like flies buzzing around a ripe melon. "Of course, Ma," he said. "That's the smart thing to do." Over supper, I laid it on thick. Talked about how the stairs were getting harder to manage. How the garden was just too much. I even let my hand tremble a little when I reached for the salt. You ever think about selling the place? Evan asked casually, reaching for his wine. I looked out the window toward the edge of the forest, where James and I used to walk on Sunday evenings. The trees there catch light like stained glass. I whispered, like it was hard to admit. I've had offers. He perked up. Really? Anyone serious? One man from Atlanta said something about timber rights. I shook my head, but I wouldn't know how to begin. Oh, I can help with that, Evan said quickly. I've got a friend who does real estate law. We could get the ball rolling this weekend. I smiled and let the silence stretch. Let him think he was winning. Wouldn't hurt to learn, I said at last. Maybe this house has served its time. He toasted to new beginnings. I toasted to clarity. After dinner, while he stepped outside to take a call. No doubt to that snake KFAX. I accidentally left the folder labeled Will and House Deed out on the coffee table. Inside, nothing but copies of my church newsletters, and a pie recipe clipped from a 1992 Southern Living. But it looked official, and he couldn't resist peeking. I watched from the kitchen as he opened it. Just a flicker of confusion, then that slick little smirk. That's how I knew the trap was working. Later, I set up the guest room, tucked fresh towels on the bed, and laid out one of James's old flannel robes, just to remind Evan what kind of man used to live here. Before I turned in, I checked the recorder. In the hallway photo frame. Still working, still blinking red. I'd planted it right beside the picture of Evan at 16. Smiling next to James and me on the 4th of July. Back when he still fit in this house. As I lay in bed, I thought of James again. How he used to say a gardener's job wasn't just to grow, but to prune. You leave dead things on too long, he'd say. They'll rot the whole root. That night, I slept soundly. The trap was set. And my boy, he was already caught, just didn't know it yet. I knew he'd try something. I just didn't expect him to move so fast. Saturday night, after a long syrupy day of fake smiles. And too much, Ma, let me do that. I served Evan my pot roast and poured myself a small glass of wine. Real wine, real food, real trust. Except, of course, none of it was. Halfway through dessert, I started swaying just a little. Tipped my spoon on purpose. Let my words slur at the edges. Oh, I must be more tired than I thought, I said, placing my hand to my forehead like some frail widow. In a Tennessee Williams play. Evan jumped up so fast you'd think I'd clutched my chest. You okay, Ma? Millimeter, I murmured. Maybe just a lie down. He guided me to the couch, far too eager. Tucked a blanket over me. Patted my arm like I was already halfway to heaven. You just rest. Don't worry about a thing. I think maybe you should call someone, I whispered, barely audible. No, you just need rest, he said. Too quick. Calling people just makes things worse. And there it was. The silence, the delay, the no help. I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of his footsteps. Fade toward the hallway. He thought he had me. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Laura was already in the driveway. See, I'd told her to wait for my signal. Porch light off by 8:30, whether I was fine or suddenly sick. At 8:37, she came knocking hard. Doris, she called out, like it was all coincidence. Her voice sweet and light. You didn't answer my text about Sunday service. Just figured I'd drop by. Evan came to the door looking like he'd swallowed a tack. Oh, hi, Miss Laura, he said. His mouth already stretching into a fake grin. She's resting. Not feeling well. Laura breezed past him like a summer storm. Doris never skips church prep. I'll just peek in. I don't think, wouldn't take but a second. She marched straight into the living room. Found me asleep with one eye slightly open. And patted my hand like she'd done when I was coming out of anesthesia last spring. Hey there, she whispered. You want him gone? I blinked once. That was our code. She straightened. You know, Evan, I think she might need to be checked out. Sudden fatigue at her age. It's better to be safe. She just needs rest, he repeated, more firm this time. I've got it handled. Laura turned to him slowly, deliberately. I'm sure you think you do. The room went still. I shifted in the blanket, sat up slightly. Laura, could you help me to the kitchen? I think I need some water. Of course, hun, she said. Let's get you upright. Evan didn't stop her. He just stood there, frozen. Caught in a moment where the script had flipped. And he'd forgotten his next line. In the kitchen, with the faucet running and the walls thin. I whispered to Laura. He didn't call for help. Exactly what I needed to hear, she said. I sipped my water, real water this time. And looked out the window into the dark. Evan was pacing now, cell phone in hand. Muttering into the line. The porch light made his shadow dance across the floor. And I knew he was losing control. That night, Laura insisted on staying over, just in case. Evan didn't argue. He even offered to sleep in his car. Which I found real interesting, considering the bed he'd claimed as his own just hours earlier. He took the couch instead, and I slept like a stone. Because, sweetheart, when a snake strikes early, it means he's scared. And when they're scared, they make mistakes. Sunday morning dawned quiet, grey, and heavy with mountain fog. The kind of day that muffles sound. And blurs the line between truth and pretense. Evan was still asleep on the couch. Snoring like sin itself. Mouth open, one sock on. Phone clutched to his chest like a guilty man's Bible. I crept past him in my house slippers. Careful not to wake him. Though God knows I wasn't afraid. Just patient. I opened the hallway closet and reached behind the old photo albums. There it was, right where I'd planted it 3 days ago. The little black recorder tucked inside the frame. Of our 1993 family reunion photo. James holding a plate of ribs. Evan, back when he still had freckles and joy. Me in a denim dress I wouldn't be caught dead in now. The recorder blinked green, still running. I carried it back to the kitchen, set it on the counter. And rewound it. It took a moment, the static crackling like pine needles underfoot. Then I heard his voice. No, she's not going to make trouble. She barely knows what day it is. A pause. Some paper shuffling. I've got the original copy of the will. Yeah, just need her to resign. She won't remember the difference. My hand curled into a fist. I'll have her out of there in a few weeks. Either she gets confused enough to sign the POA. Or I'll use the doctor angle. Laura is not a real threat, just an old busybody. The voice on the other end was muffled. But I could make out one word, timber. Yeah, the property's bigger than I thought. Forest full of hardwood. KFAX said we could move fast once I'm on the deed. It's just a matter of making her seem unfit. That did it. I turned the recorder off. And stared at my own reflection in the coffee pot stainless steel side. My face looked calm, too calm. I slipped the recorder into my apron pocket and sat down at the table. He came stumbling into the kitchen not long after. Yawning like a man who thinks he's earned rest. Morning, Ma. You sleep okay? I did, I said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Better than expected. He reached for the sugar bowl. Not noticing that my hand was steady this time. Not trembling, not frail. I'd never felt clearer in my life. I was thinking, I said, offering him the second cup. You should call your lawyer friend. Maybe I could talk to him today. Get the will stuff moving. His eyes lit up like the 4th of July. You sure? I nodded. Might as well. He pulled out his phone immediately, fingers flying. I'll get him on the line now. You'll really like him. Smart guy, knows how to simplify things for folks your age. Folks your age. I smiled into my coffee. Sounds perfect. He stepped outside to take the call. Pacing just beyond the window where I could see. Every twitch of his mouth, every gleam in his eye. Snake in the garden, thinking I don't know what he's planting. But what he didn't see, what he couldn't, was that I'd already sown something stronger. The truth. And I'd caught him saying it out loud. Not just to me, to someone else. To someone who could put it in a file and wear it on a badge. I didn't go to church that morning. I had other prayers to tend to. Instead, I wrote in my ledger. Recording saved. Timber rights mentioned. Document manipulation confirmed. Witness me. God help him. And then I called Laura. Tell Detective Miles, I said. The harvest is ready. Time has always been my ally. I've learned how to wait. Through James's illness. Through Evan's long silent years. Through every Sunday, I set an extra place at the table. That stayed empty. And now I wait again, but this time with purpose. After the recording, I let things settle like silt in a stream. I didn't rush, didn't press. I simply let Evan get comfortable. Let him think I was leaning on him. He started humming in the mornings. Said things like, "We ought to get that will sign soon, Ma. Just for your peace of mind." And I'd nod slowly as if the thought of my own peace of mind had just occurred to me. Each day he stayed, he dropped the mask a little more. He started checking the mailbox like it belonged to him. Asked if I had the house key copied, just in case. Started telling me which bills I should cancel. "You won't need cable much longer, Ma. Not when we move you someplace simpler." He thought I was retreating, that I was slipping. I played the part well. Misplaced my reading glasses on purpose. Called the vacuum the blender. Took longer to answer questions. "Oh, I'm just tired," I'd say, rubbing my temples. What I was really doing was watching, listening, and writing it all down. I filled 2 pages in my ledger this week. Times, dates, quotes. Like the moment he muttered half to himself, while flipping through my kitchen drawer. "This place is a gold mine." Or when I overheard him on speakerphone with KFAX again. Standing just outside the window near the rose trellis. "Once I get her to sign the quitclaim," he said, "we can put it on the market next month. Conservatorship is plan B if she gets stubborn." Stubborn. Darling, I've been called worse by better men. I passed the notes to Laura, who passed them on to Detective Miles quietly.
No fuss.
No need for drama. Just facts. Calmly gathered like ripened tomatoes off the vine. Miles was impressed, she said. Called it the cleanest trail he's ever seen. Meanwhile, I let Evan make himself at home. I let him take over the shopping, the phone calls. Let him tell the neighbors I was resting more these days. Even had him answer the phone when Pastor Ray called. "She's napping again," he said. "But I'll pass your message along. I'm helping manage things now." I smiled when I heard that. Because with every word, every assumption, every arrogant step he took inside my life, he left a footprint. And footprints, sweetheart, are easy to follow. I did start napping a little. Real naps, the kind where you let your body go slack. Because for once, the burden isn't yours alone. Because someone else is keeping watch. Detective Miles told Laura, "We're almost there. They're just waiting for one more thing. A formal declaration, something signed, witnessed. Showing Evan's intent to claim what isn't his. And that's coming soon. Because I told Evan today, in the gentlest voice I could muster. I think I'm ready to finalize things. The house, the will, all of it." He lit up like a gambler holding 4 aces. "Maybe we could have a little dinner," I said. "One last proper meal to celebrate." He nodded so fast I thought his neck might snap. And as I stood to clear our plates, I whispered inside my own heart, "You better eat well, boy. Because soon you'll be choking on the truth." The first cold snap rolled in last night. Wind rustling through the trees like whispers from the dead. I woke before dawn. The way I used to when James had early shifts at the clinic. Something in the air told me the balance had tipped. That after all this waiting, the seesaw had leaned my way. Laura called just after 8. Her voice was low, clipped, but steady. Miles wants to meet today. I didn't ask why. I just said, the back porch, noon. Evan was out. Said he had to pick up something important in town. He took my car, naturally. His rental had vanished on Thursday. He claimed the company needed it back. I didn't argue. I let him drive my car. And thank the Lord I did. Because when Detective Miles stepped onto my back porch, 2 hours later, tall, quiet, and wrapped in a coat that still smelled faintly of wood smoke, he handed me a photo. My car parked outside a repair garage 2 towns over. Inside, my brake line, neatly cut. Not a snap, not corrosion, a slice. Miles looked at me, his expression unreadable. He told the mechanic he'd noticed a leak. Asked for a quote, never picked the car up. I felt the breath leave my lungs, not in fear, but in clarity. Was he going to wait until I got back behind the wheel? I asked. My voice level. Hard to say, Miles replied. But if you'd driven that car through these hills. He didn't finish. Didn't have to. I folded my hands in my lap and nodded. Then it's time. Miles gave me a flash drive with the latest evidence. The audio files, the emails. A few photos taken by a plainclothes officer posted down the road. You've done most of the legwork, he said. All we need now is the final play. Something formal, something he can't talk his way out of. I smiled. He'll get it tonight. We didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. After he left, I sat on the porch swing and let myself feel the weight of it. Not fear, not sadness. But the ache of knowing I'd raised a child who could have killed me for a check. A hawk soared overhead, silent and sharp. I made a note in my ledger. Confirmed brake tampering. Intent. Silence or seize. Play continues. Then I went inside and set the table. Linen napkins. The good china. James's old place setting. Just for symmetry. I even lit the tapered candles. We got on our 15th anniversary. The ones we used when company came. Because tonight wasn't just dinner, sweetheart. It was curtains up. He came home around 6 o'clock, full of charm and swagger. Something smells amazing, he said. Setting his keys on the counter like they belonged to him. I thought we'd celebrate, I told him. I've decided to finalize the will. Get everything in order tomorrow. He blinked, then grinned. That's great, Ma. Really great. I poured wine. Let him take the first sip. Where's your glass? He asked. Oh, I'll have tea instead. You know, it settles my stomach. He raised his glass again. To family. I clinked my teacup against his wine glass. To closure. And I knew, as the candlelight flickered over his face, that the balance had shifted. That he'd walked into a trap so quiet, so gentle. He still thought he was the one holding the leash. But tomorrow he'd wake up to the truth. And the only thing waiting at the door would be the sound of a badge. I polished the silver that morning with hands that didn't shake. The linen was pressed. The roast sat seasoned on the counter. The cornbread, James's recipe, just enough sugar to feel like home, was warming in the oven. And the air smelled like finality. Evan wandered in around 10 o'clock. Still in his robe, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Like a man who thought the world belonged to him. I forgot how nice it is to sleep here, he said. Pouring himself coffee. So quiet out in the woods. Peaceful, I smiled into my teacup. Yes, peaceful. He didn't notice I hadn't sipped. After lunch, I told him I'd invited a few folks over for dinner. Oh. He tried to sound casual. But I saw it in his jaw. The clench. He hadn't planned for guests. Just Laura and my attorney, I said. Thought I might as well get things moving on the paperwork. You already called Harmon? He asked, voice tightening. Of course, I said lightly. He's handled everything since James passed. He's practically family. That word family twisted in the air between us. I figured we'd make a night of it, I continued. Good food, some toasts. Closure. He nodded slowly, eyes calculating. Sounds great, Ma. By 5, the table was set. 3 glasses at each place, just like Mama taught me. Fresh flowers in the center. Wild goldenrod I'd picked that morning. The kind James used to tuck behind my ear when he thought I needed cheering. Laura arrived first. Wearing that plum cardigan she always says. Makes her feel respectable but suspicious. I gave her a wink. She carried a cobbler and a purse. Big enough to hide a recorder, a revolver, or both. Then came Richard Harmon, my lawyer of 30 years. Steady hands, pressed collar. And that slow, calm voice that's talked me through every hard decision since 1982. Evan greeted them both with that salesman grin. Well, this is lovely. I'm so glad Ma is finally taking charge of her future. Indeed, Richard said, giving me a glance. That held all the real meaning. We ate. We laughed. I even let Evan carve the roast. Like he was the man of the house. I waited until dessert. I'd like to make an announcement, I said, setting down my fork. Before we sign anything tonight. Evan sat straighter. Laura folded her napkin. Richard took out his pen. I stood. I've decided not to leave the house to my son. Silence. Evan blinked. What? I looked at him, really looked at him. And saw not a son. But a man so consumed by greed. He couldn't even pretend to be hurt convincingly. I'm transferring it, I said. To the Appalachian Conservation Trust. Effective immediately, in James's name. You're what? His voice cracked on the last syllable. I stayed calm, measured. It's what your father would have wanted. To preserve the land, the trees, the home for good. But, Ma. No, I said, my voice suddenly sharp. No more, Ma. Not tonight. Laura's eyes glistened, but she kept her chin high. Richard flipped to a second set of documents. Ones Evan hadn't seen. I watched him pale as the papers passed across the table. My signature already inked, notarized that morning. This can't be legal, he muttered. It's more than legal, Richard said. It's airtight. Evan stood abruptly, knocking over his wine glass. It spilled across the tablecloth like blood. And then I handed him one final thing. A plain white envelope. Inside, a flash drive. What's this? Just something for you to think about, I said, folding my hands. A few of your conversations. A few promises you made to KFAX. Some talk of break lines. He stared at me, face drained of color. You think you can trap me? He hissed. I didn't trap you, I said softly. You walked in on your own. The room fell quiet. And then I rose from the table and walked out. Past the photos on the hallway wall. Past the coat rack where James's old hat still hung. Past the door Evan thought would one day be his. I didn't look back. Because, sweetheart, the dinner was never for celebration. It was for consecration. I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was reclaiming my legacy. It was the teacups that did it. I pulled down my finest bone china. White with tiny cornflowers painted around the rim. James gave them to me on our 25th wedding anniversary. I only ever used them for real company. And tonight, tonight called for ceremony. Evan sat stiff at the table. That envelope and flash drive untouched beside his plate. Laura and Richard had stepped outside to give us privacy. But they knew better. They were only waiting for the signal. I moved slowly, carefully. My fingers didn't shake. Thought we could have a quiet cup, I said. Before everything's finalized. Evan watched me warily. You really going through with this? I poured the water, let the steam curl up like ghosts rising. I didn't answer. Just placed the cup before him, then sat down with mine. 2 identical cups, 2 identical saucers, only one switch. He stared into the tea, then back at me. So that's it. You're cutting me out of everything. I sipped my tea. Real chamomile. Real peace. Not cutting you out. Just letting you go. He took a long drink of his, probably expecting the usual mellow slide of herbs and honey. But what I'd added tonight wasn't poison. It was perspective. Laura had helped me find it. A perfectly legal low-dose sedative. Just enough to blur the edges. Nothing harmful. Just enough to make a man's tongue wag loose. And his balance tip. He blinked, rubbed his temple. Something's off. I leaned forward. Let's talk about that brake line. His head snapped up. I didn't. What are you talking about? You said it yourself. Right there on that call. She won't drive it again anyway. I quoted him word for word. His face drained white. I pulled the little recorder from my pocket and set it on the table. Hit play. Once I get her to sign the quitclaim, we can put it on the market. She's confused half the time. Just need to make it look like she's declining. He reached for it. Clumsy now. You're setting me up. No, Evan, I said, my voice like cold stone. You did that all by yourself. Right then, Laura opened the front door and stepped in. Detective Miles behind her. No uniform, no lights. Just the quiet authority of someone who already knows. Evan tried to stand, wobbled. What is this? He snapped, his words starting to slur. You drugged me. Don't be dramatic, I said, standing slowly. It's what you've been giving me, isn't it? Consider it a shared experience. Miles walked forward and placed a hand on Evan's shoulder. Mr. Whitlow, he said calmly. You need to come with me. We've got a lot to talk about. Evan's eyes darted to me. Wide now. Wild. You planned this. I prepared this, I said. He was too disoriented to fight, too fogged to run. Miles led him out gently. The way you'd guide a drunken man home from a party. Only this one was headed for a room with bars. And a file thicker than winter fog. When the door closed behind them, I stood alone in the dining room. The clock ticked on the wall. The table sat quiet, just 2 cups, one empty, one full. I carried the full one to the sink and poured it down the drain. No need to keep remnants. Justice doesn't require leftovers. By the time the morning sun filtered through the pines and warmed the windowsill, I was already gone. Boots on, cardigan buttoned, and suitcase zipped. Left a note for Laura on the kitchen table, right next to the blue teacup Evan had used. The house was spotless. His bag still by the door. He hadn't even packed. Thought he'd be staying. Thought wrong. I took the old pickup. James's truck still runs like a dream. If you know how to talk to her. And I headed into town. Parked it behind the co-op where nobody looked twice. And caught a ride with the pastor's wife heading up to Burnsville. Told her I had a visit to make. She didn't ask. Laura texted at 7:12 a.m. His up. His panicking. Police just pulled in. I didn't reply. Let her handle the fallout. Let him handle the silence. Because there's a kind of reckoning that doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It comes when the person you plan to conquer simply vanishes, walks away, and leaves you standing in the ruins you built with your own 2 hands. Evan would find the recorder gone. The flash drive missing. The fake will shredded in the fireplace. He'd call out for me, I'm sure. Maybe curse, maybe plead. Maybe realize too late that I had never been confused. Not once. He would open drawers and find them empty. He would look at the land and know he would never own it. And when the officers asked him to come quietly, he wouldn't have a mother to defend him. To cry or cover or claim he just needed help. All he'd have left was his name. And a file that said otherwise. I spent the day at Laura's cabin in the hills. Little place she keeps for quiet weekends. Just past the trout stream. She left me fresh sheets and a note. Rest. His handled. So I did. Sat on the porch and watched the shadows stretch across the ridge. The wind smelled like pine and river rock. That night, I cooked for myself. Just a little skillet of eggs and tomatoes. Same way James liked them on cold mornings. And when I crawled into bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "You did good, old girl." Because sometimes the fiercest thing you can do isn't fight. It's leave. No tears, no speeches. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind you. Soft and final.